Well, we are here. We're advocates protecting children, and we're here with our newest awardee of the
Woo-hoo!
Standing Up for Women and Children Award, Joey Brite. Thank you so
Yay.
much for coming and being with us. And we want to meet you. We want to hear who you are, and we just want to celebrate you for all that you're doing to protect women and children.
Well, thank you so much for this award. I was absolutely shocked, and your organization, I love to seeing that pop up, and you guys can see how much I've been moving across the aisles too for since Erin, since you ever interviewed me a long time ago. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but I think that visibly people can see a lot more of that stuff. And I'm thrilled that there are more organizations that are popping up, especially, you know, that do not want to use the language, that don't want to bend in this way, like, oh, we're not transphobes. Look, we're going to virtue signal this and that or whatever. You know, it's like the idea of this is something where we're locking arms no matter what other things we believe in.
Well, and there are a lot of people who came after you initially for your Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse article, where you really, you helped me to understand, and I think you helped a lot of people to understand why it's important not to capitulate to the language of the trans rights activists and how that's so dangerous. And you know, when I first came into this, I was very much of the opinion that we should be, you know, kind and we wouldn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But the further we've gotten into this, the more I realized this is really a battle about fundamental protections of women and girls. And if we're worried about being nice, we're not going to win this battle. We're going to, you know, end up with the eradication of women and girls' rights.
And this was why I had already been in it, you know, for decades, right? Before you had your own personal journey. And for me as an adult, watching an entire population, a particular demographic of women, this was lesbians in the San Francisco area. And then I saw it in Los Angeles. I saw that it happened up north. It was happening in Seattle, in Portland, to the West Coast. This was not a coincidence, and I could see that. But before that, something that a lot of people don't talk about, and I know people ask, why does it seem like so many of the lesbians and gay men not only don't have a problem with this, but actually wrapped their arms around it and embraced it? And I've talked about this in other things, but the idea that there is already, you've got a population that has already felt oppressed for good reason. Again, if I had a partner and they went into the hospital, for example, in an emergency room, and we weren't married, I wasn't a sister, I couldn't prove that I was a blood relative, I couldn't just be a partner, a romantic partner or anything, that we had no rights. And so basic things like that we were oppressed around. You get these communities, gay community, lesbian community, and then this LGB comes along and we're embracing sexual orientation. And that had been going on for years. And all of a sudden, this T comes along, and we as the LGB community is told, hey, this is really important. This is just as important as you. And this is a population that actually is even more oppressed than you are. And every gay and lesbian publication, because what we had were social networks, and we had magazines, and there were some TV, minor TV shows that were coming out that were trying to celebrate our culture and the contributions that in wider society that I'm saying that as the collective. And all of a sudden this T comes in, and I'm thinking, some of you know, I thought that I was a transsexual decades ago. I thought I was a man, a boy, trapped in this lesbian body, trapped in this woman's body. And that I was going to be a better man, if I decided to go this route of medicalization and all that. And so who knows it better than somebody that really had that mindset, was living as a lesbian for a number of years, but also had feminist analysis, also was looking at all these different, structures of political structures and theories, Marxism, all this different stuff that I had going on. And that finally was in there and kicking in for me to examine what's with this tea. And I'm looking at the same time, literally at buildings going up with the tea that had never been there before. The money had never been there to help destigmatize lesbians or gay men. But all of a sudden, this money was coming in. And I just, again, I always have Jennifer Billick to thank, because I started noticing in the late 70s that lesbians were already wrapping their arms before the gigantic money came in. This had to do with how females are socialized to always want to protect, always want to defend, always want to wrap our arms around anybody that seems like they're being abused, neglected. If you look at the number of social workers in the United States, the good majority of those are going to be women over men. Social work only became a profession that men felt they could get into once we started destigmatizing this idea that men wanting to get into anything like nursing and social work, that those were not female professions. They were professions that needed people that had compassion and understanding and empathy. So we used to view men at not being able to have that, really, right?
Well, and a lot of it has to do with just the expectations that are put on us. I mean, I think about the fact that I was in a bathroom I was undressing, I was changing clothes because I was going to testify in front of the state legislature, and all of the stalls were full. And so I was undressing in the common area in the bathroom, and a man in a dress walks in, and this was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I didn't scream. I didn't go report him. I just, did the like, ugh. And this guy ogled me and, had this smirk on his face. And I didn't do anything to protect myself or the other women because of this idea that I don't want to make a scene. I don't want to, I don't want to hurt his feelings, even though he just completely violated me. And this is part of the problem, is that the women who are fighting this often have these messages that, we've got to be nice, we've got to be kind and compassionate. And I think we can do all this while being kind and compassionate, but it isn't kind and compassionate to uphold this lie that is damaging people so much.
And that scenario, and I've heard you talk about that, Erin, that was horrible. I remember the first time I heard that. Again, because I was in my socializing, I was in mostly all women's spaces. I mean, when you're talking about women's bookstores, even some of the businesses I used to go to, the bars, the clubs, the cultural centers, there were a lot of women only things that went on. And it's something that I've talked about before, that we're mammals, right? No matter what we start intellectualizing about, we are mammals. And so when you're in mostly a women's space, like there you're talking about a bathroom, usually a very small space, and a man walks in, everybody notices. Everybody notices. Even the very friendly men that were very effeminate gay men that sometimes came into the women's bathrooms. Usually it was in the bar only where this would happen, where the men's bathroom was absolutely packed or something, and the women's bathroom was not as full. We didn't freak out, but we all knew. We often knew what the guy's name was too, because that's how much of a community there used to be, where you would get familiar with. It didn't mean that we were friends necessarily, but we knew that that man was gay. We knew he had there was nothing predatory on that level, but we would run it through very quickly. And the thing is now that because of this normalization that is occurring in the entire culture, and it's broken down the boundaries of adults, where we start thinking, oh, it's okay, this and that, like what we see going on with Debbie Hayton, in the UK with high school students that he's a physics teacher for, the damage that is doing in terms of blurring the lines. It's literally messing with our DNA in a way of what we know intrinsically as mammals to protect ourselves. We still have those. It
undermines our ability to trust reality. And girls especially, who are vulnerable to predators, they need that radar. and it's being destroyed now. And that's a shame, because it means that more and more women and girls are going to be sacrificed to the gods of this transgender ideology.
When you were
Which
just
is-
talking about him being a high school teacher, Debbie Hayton, it just sparked in my memory. When I was a senior in high school, there was a young male teacher, and we girls kind of all tittered and thought he was awfully cute. And we were at a school dance, and I asked him to dance, and he said, "No, after you graduate high school, then maybe I'll dance with you, but I'm not going to dance with you now." That was very wise. There were boundaries, and he understood that was a boundary. Now we have these men who want to be in the women's bathroom with the high school girls or the elementary school girls, as the case of Mix, whatever his name is in Wisconsin. And yeah, those boundaries are necessary. I was a stupid teenage girl who didn't appreciate the danger that would have put me and him in if he had danced with me. I keep asking, where are the adults? Where are the adults? So Joey, I just want to say thank you for being an adult. You're an adult in this, and we need more adults.
Thank you for taking the safety of our children and women into such high regard.
And I wanted to show off this calendar that Joey made. In addition to speaking truth and standing firm on the necessity to protect women and girls' rights and protections in bathrooms and prisons and locker rooms and sports. Joey's also organized, I don't even know how many protests. She put this calendar.
I can't remember
together.
if it's 13 or 14 we did in 2021. And that's interesting. You're pulling that up.
So you're protecting, you're not only protecting women and girls' rights to bathrooms and spaces and sports, but you're also saying we need to stop allowing this horrible transgender industry to damage our children.
It's insidious. And the thing about these protests also is that, and there I got the gender mapper, Erin, and her work. These photos that you've shown so far have reflected 5 different cities. Now we've got 6 different cities from the whole year. I put the calendar together, hoping to reflect. That was Los Angeles. And it's empowering parents. That's New York. That's one of my favorite images. Just because they're coming down the sidewalk, and the photo was snapped, and it couldn't be bigger in your face. And there's Seattle, and there's Utah. Yeah.
And yeah, this is the University of Utah, where they have a gender clinic, where the doctors have consistently been testifying at our state legislature that this is medically necessary treatment, which just makes me want to pull my hair out. And whenever they say that nobody should interfere with their doctoring, I think, what about the opioid crisis? What about lobotomies? What about, we have instance after instance where, it's been clear that doctors have not been acting in the best interests of their patients. And so the fact that we're supposed to just accept that doctors are, that self-harming is the appropriate response to what is essentially a dissociative disorder is alarming. And you've been, as far as I know, one of the few people who have been able to organize protests, carry them out in a safe and peaceful way. You've just done a phenomenal job of raising awareness.
Thank you. And I know you took you're one of many now. I've had over 75. Now I can say I've had over 85 adults take my safety, sessions. And I do not believe in us just laying down and taking it. I mean, that there's a whole procedure, protocols that I have where literally everybody has a role. I always know I'm supposed to always know who shows up at the protest. I know the people by name. We've gone through sitting in sessions and talking about there are protocols for if somebody were to be attacked and in what ways they might be attacked and where do we go and what do we do, and the leader and having a bullhorn and all of that stuff. There's been a lot of talk this last year, and I got a smear campaign against me because there was a photograph that came out of a completely different thing that had nothing to do with my protests that I organized for Can I Get a Witness, which is, I don't know if the name of my company has even come up at this point, but these protests are Can I Get a Witness? And that's where I set up. And one of the times when I first met Erin was after the conference happened, the Can I Get a Witness conference in August of 2020. Anyway, there was a photograph that was snapped of me at a Netflix. It was supposed to be this big walkout, that the non-binary and trans workers and all this stuff of Netflix, they got mad at Dave Chappelle. He used in his comedy, The Closer, that he had read about J.K. Rowling and all that. And he said, I'm on Team TERF. Yeah. I'm Team TERF or something. And that became this catch-all phrase. And it was one that immediately, for a lot of us, I don't know how did that affect you when you heard about the Team TERF thing and what was going on with Netflix? Any of you?
Yeah, I watched the video of Dave Chappelle because I had never heard of him before. I'm pretty out of the loop with social stuff. So I watched it. And what struck me is Dave Chappelle went after everybody. He said some horrible things about women, horrible things about lesbians, horrible things about whites, horrible things about blacks. He probably even made fun of handicapped people. I mean, he really goes after everybody. But it's the trans activists that are the ones that get so bent out of shape and make it an issue and insist that this is an example of being marginalized and discriminated against, which is, it's ludicrous. And I love the photo that you're referring to, because you were at this protest, and there are all these trans rights activists there, and you're not a very large, you're petite, I believe. You had a sign, and do you want to take it from there, explain what happened?
Well, there were 5 of us that decided when we saw that this so-called walkout was going to happen, which I have to tell you, at the end of the end, it looked like there were maybe 5 people or something that, came walking out like they had to do this display. It was all for the cameras. Mm-hmm. But a very clever mom in LA, when this was announced, there were just 5 of us that showed up because she saw it as a good opportunity. I'm from LA. I knew that there was going to be world entertainment press there. Mm-hmm. And it's something that, when we, meaning like myself and you, all of you working on this, we don't get press. We don't get media. We know a lot of things that all of us have done that have helped to move the needle to wake up the public. All of us have done things like that. And I wasn't able to get big press, until October. Finally, there'll be some stuff coming out in March of this year that will show a protest in Los Angeles. It's like, finally, it took almost all year of all these protests and all these people. Otherwise, we use social media, right? That's what we have as best as we can. But 5 of us really used the opportunity, and we showed up. And free speech, that was our message. It was free speech. It wasn't about anything else. Mm-hmm. And so coming like that there, we were being extremely successful. All of our signs had to do with cancel culture, allow free speech. We didn't have any special thing about Dave. One of my colleagues made a sign that had hashtag Team TERF. And all of us really worked the radio press, the blogging press, and big national and international television press and all that stuff. And we showed up, I know, in different places all over. And our goal was to be able to have enough of a conversation so that we could talk about child medicalization, right? Because that's all of us do, right? We're fighting that. And how do you get from Dave Chappelle to talking about child medicalization? Well, guess what? We did it. Because it's under our skin. It's like we're ready to go. We've been so hungry for people to even bring it up as an issue, where you can go from one thing, one subject, and lead to another. And people go, whoa. And we literally, this happened to several of us because we debriefed later. We had people, reporters and bloggers and everybody, if we got there, once they got through talking to us, they turned the tape recorder off, they turned the digital camera off, whatever, and they looked at us and said, are you serious that's going on? And they were asking about the puberty blockers, the wrong sex hormones, these surgeries. I had one older, very prominent television guy in Los Angeles. When he turned his thing off, he said, I'm so glad that you're here and that we found you and that you're talking about this. He says, I'm ready to retire. I am sick to death of everybody at my TV station being forced with the pronouns. This stuff, we all know this is crap. this is what we know the majority of the public feels like, ordinary working people. And I wish, Erin, when you brought up my calendar, thank you for doing that. And yes, I'm selling them. You can go to the Facebook page for Can I Get a Witness?
And we'll post that on the link below.
It's all good. But the stories that are coming out from all these protests, because, you know, I've only been to a couple of protests now. I'm about to go to another one. We've got something scheduled, which I never mention the city, never give out the date ahead of time, vet everybody. And one of the things I was talking about with the training, I do not believe in incorporating nonviolent direct action, or also NVDA, is a form of protest. And it's very good for some situations and some protests. I don't practice that, and I don't train with that. And this is what I got criticized about. And these issues of me being at Netflix got conflated with how I work my trainings for people at the protests. And NVDA, or again, nonviolent direct action, does call for a very specific kind of, even though my protests are peaceful and we're COVID compliant or whatever is, you know, we have to do at this point in time, certainly all last year, I never tell any of the participants, if you get hit, you know, just roll in a ball and take it. Don't fight back. That is what NVDA, that's one of the key things, so that one is never shown to be violent, which to me, defending yourself is not violent. In the way that I run these protests, absolutely. Even though there are no weapons that anybody brings, we do have defense mechanisms that are in place. And no, I never tell anybody, if you get knocked down, just take it. No, we don't. And if they think that we're not going to protect ourselves, they've got another thing coming. And that is not an invitation. We haven't had any problems. The most, you know, the most violent thing that's ever happened was this creepy man in New York who took his water bottle and threw it. And if you saw the leader of that, you know, was so quick, you know, that she just brought her sign up and
she just walked away.
No, it didn't even flinch. But because she's like that, because she's got years and years of protesting and years of having had people come at her. And I'm not interested in building necessarily one-offs.
Yeah.
I want to build teams of people. And Netflix was a one-off, and it was theatrics. It was a theatrical street theater kind of protest. And when the photographer from the Epoch Times caught a shot of me, I was literally had my hand, my 5'2", that was my third jump up at this man who was like about 6'5", you know, and
he's a huge guy, and he took your sign. Yeah,
huge guy. And the thing was, there wasn't any violence that happened between us, but because that photo was snapped, you know, there are a couple of very prominent feminists in this country who immediately started a smear campaign against me, saying that I was promoting that women attack men and that women attack these men in dresses. And that could literally destroy the gender critical movement.
So Joy, that brings me back to that story about me in the bathroom. And what is an appropriate response for a woman who's in a bathroom and a man walks in? What is the appropriate response for a woman who's in a shower?
Get out now.
But at the same, if we just keep walking away and being quiet and calm and compliant women.
No, are you saying, but you're saying we should say to the man, get out, get out.
Yeah.
Not that we should get out. Say to the man, get out.
Get out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Lesbians have been doing it for years, as much as they've been embracing, you know, these men. The other thing is that, you know, when we talked about this earlier, and I brought up about we're all mammals and we have an instinct, you know, and we know male from female kind of instinctually. We're always looking at secondary sex characteristics. A lot of people get fooled by that. And I agree with you. That's breaking down boundaries. Again, if little kids can't tell, if they're being taught that they should not pay attention to their gut, we know where this is all leading, you know, pedophilia, of course. So, of course, I used to teach self-defense classes. I did for over 5 years. That's another weird thing in my past, is that I taught self-defense classes. just the basic thing of when you don't feel comfortable or you feel like something's unsafe, you're being approached by somebody, they're starting to get too close. You know, on average, men have a distance with each other of arm's length. Naturally, men don't go up to each other the way that women do. So when we see a man starting to come that close, I mean, I do it with anybody, men or women, if they start moving in, unless I'm making eye contact and they, you know, we're recognizing each other and I can see they're not going to, you know, hit me. Men have that as kind of, it's just, that's where the handshake comes from. The handshake is a distance. I don't have a gun. We're going to talk now. I welcome you into this space, this little space of the arm's distance. Women aren't raised that way. Women are raised to go at kids and other women and the hug and the this and the that. You know, I'm not a big hugger. I've learned that that is something that is more socially safe for me to do. And what I've always in bathrooms, I've had to tell men to get out of bathrooms numerous times. I've been in a bathroom where a man literally walked in by accident because the doors, whether the sign was off or something, they start to walk in. And if there's like a baby changing area or a family area, as they call it, a dressing room prior to those tiny stalls that we often are getting in. I've been there where a man started to come in and I'm like, get out. And he's like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But it's basic. And in self-defense, the very first class of an 8-week course that I used to do that was 3 hours long, each course, the very first class that we would teach is how to say no. It sounds so simple, and yet it gets incorporated with a physical move so that we start to introduce women to, this is what you're going to be doing for 8 classes, you know. And
I've been trying to teach my daughters just to say what they want or say what they feel.
Right.
I'm not going with you. I don't want to go. I am uncomfortable with this. Just speak it out. Because I had to learn to do that as an adult. I didn't know that even if somebody asked me to do something that I could say, no, I'm sorry, I can't. I actually had to have a friend coach me on boundaries because I was raised as a people pleaser. If somebody asks you for something, you bend over backwards to give it to them. And that's not good.
Whole ideology is feeding into that and breaking that down even further so that we're being told that by having boundaries, we are hateful and bigots and akin to being Nazis. And that's the message that they're getting out there, that our consent is meaningless, or because another woman is okay with it, that we should be okay with it. Again, trying to suggest that, another person can consent for us, which they can't.
Right.
So it's all about breaking down these boundaries so that your daughters don't feel like they have a right to say no, and in fact are afraid to say no.
Yeah.
And to me, that's so insidious. As you said, it's opening the door to predators. That's one of the things that I think is so important for people to understand, is that the transgender umbrella is this, anybody can identify into it. And so you have people who are just pretending. You have gay men who like to be effeminate. You have predators who have figured out this is a great way to be able to predate on vulnerable people. So it's so different from the LGB. It's so phenomenally different.
Totally different.
And I think that that's something that people do not understand, is that, who, Joey or Maria or Erin or May Lyle is attracted to is separate from a transgender ideology that's trying to infiltrate women's spaces, women's sports, to take away our identities, to take away our language, to medicalize children, to sterilize children, to lop off the breasts off of girls. These are completely different things.
Oh, yeah. And and it makes me mad hearing you talk about this. It's funny, but it's something that a number of my friends, 3 years ago, we were gathered somewhere and somebody was saying, what really makes me mad about all this stuff that these guys are doing, this men's rights movement, is that we used to play around with gender. I know that all of you women here are old enough to know who Prince is, and who David Bowie was, and who Grace Jones was, and Patti Smith. I mean, I started getting asked in the early 2000s, maybe the late 90s, if I was going to, and again, they weren't using the phrase trans. They said, are you going to become a man? Aren't you going to become a man? I mean, they literally were saying that. That's really
if you're gender non-conforming, this is the path.
and we weren't even talking about gender non-conforming. That was a phrase that wasn't coming out so much either. It was this whole thing. And then, by the early 2000s, it was, Joey, are you looking at transing? And they would say it in a positive way sometimes, and other women. And the thing is that it's made it a lot harder for us that are older, that used to gender bend with clothing, with comedy, with a lot of things that you had to kind of be on the in to understand, just like any oppressed group, any oppressed culture has different kinds of comedy, has different kinds of signaling to each other. And a lot of that stuff has gotten messed with because of this whole thing. But this thing about me bringing up about Netflix, that photograph that came out, I want to tell you what's so nice is that while I was getting smear campaigned by feminists, prominent feminists through social media and backdoor, communications and front stuff in public that I'm going to be coming out a lot more about, I got some wonderful emails from women that didn't even know me, or they sent me stuff, DMs through Facebook and whatever, and Instagram. And one that I got a copy of that blown up to 8x10 because she said, I'd like to have an 8x10 because her 16-year-old daughter wanted it. And it made her feel like she could say no, the basic thing we were just talking about, and I've got a couple of really cool gay male friends that are totally down for centering women around this. And they're getting pissed off because now they're starting to see, this is about removing biological sex. I'm being told I'm a genital fetishist. I mean, they're getting it now. It's taken them a minute, but they're getting it.
Yeah, I just saw something put out by the United States government suggesting that we are attracted to gender, not sex. Which is just bizarre to me because I'm not sure what gender I am. I have longish hair, but I always wear a t-shirt. I wear boots all the time. So am I a female gender or a male gender? And is someone attracted to me? Does that mean they're attracted to a non-binary, non-gender conforming? Are they it becomes so nonsensical. And
I don't like shopping, and I don't like shopping. To buy shoes, and I can change a tire. Change a tire. Does that make me masculine?
I don't know. You might be a lesbian.
We're the ones who are obsessed about gender.
Tire. That's going pretty far, Maria. That's pretty far. I mean, it is, right?
It's gotten to be ludicrous. I mean, to the point where, in a video, we had Stella O'Malley who asked Debbie Hayden's wife whether or not they were lesbians. I mean, it's gotten to the point where people are accepting this absurd concept that you change your sex based on your external presentation. Which is just absolutely bizarre because it reinforces such negative stereotypes Joey, we're about the same age. I'm guessing that, when I was a little girl, the whole movement was, to break down those stereotypes. Girls can play with Legos. Girls can play with race cars. Boys can play with dollies if they want.
You're younger than I am. I never got that. I got, I wanted to play the drums. My dad told me, I famously said this, and one of my closest friends who's a man who's a jazz drummer, when I was a little girl, and I told my dad, I want to play the drums. And he said, you can't. That was one of the first things. And he said, there are two things about playing drums. Girls don't play drums. 2, only boys play drums. Well, duh. You just told me girls can't play drums. What's left? Boys. But here's the thing, the trades, you brought that up, and I was joking you, Maria, about changing a tire. I wanted to be a carpenter, and I said maybe I could do that because I didn't see myself being a nurse, a secretary. Erin, you had it a little bit better. I could only be a nurse, a secretary, a teacher. And since I came from parents that were both teachers, and my dad became an elementary school teacher, it was like they were very, very limited professions. And I thought, I am not going to do that. And I remember saying to my dad, I want to build houses. I said that when I was little, and he laughed about it. I didn't get the same thing like only men build houses. But guess what? I was in the trades, and in the 80s, when there were incentives for women to go in the trades. It was great. And I'm in California. They literally gave grants, and they were trying to get women to be carpenters and plumbers and electricians and to learn all this stuff.
Mhm.
I didn't join the union. I became a house painter completely on my own. And in my 60s now, I'm still painting houses. And, it's been a while, but it never surprises me when I'm in full painter's whites and I go to a client's home and I have met them maybe for the first time and they don't know who I am or anything. Of course, we've talked on the phone. Of course, they know that it's a woman. But sometimes I'll come in the house. I'm still there sometimes. If the husband has been the major breadwinner and is gone from the house all day, yes, that still happens. And they come home and they see in the dining room and they meet me and I'm the painter and they're kind of taken aback.
Mm.
And it's like, I've never seen a woman painter before. That still goes on.
Mm.
And as sadly, all of us know now too, we're lucky if we have a man painter come in the house because nobody's in the trades because they're all making money, on the internet. Nobody's going to be able to get their plumbing fixed, I figure, in the next few years.
So we went from your generation, which was told you have to adhere to rigid sexual.
More rigid than you. Yeah.
To my generation where, the teachers were constantly emphasizing the idea that, there's, girls can play with boys' toys, boys can play with girls' toys.
Yeah, that was not
a lot of clothes were pretty gender neutral when I was growing up. And then, and to now we have, if you adhere to a certain look, it dictates your biological sex.
Oh yeah.
I talked to one teenage girl who said, let me see if I can remember how she said it. It used to be, if you were a boy, you like to play football. If you were a girl, you like to be a cheerleader, whatever. Now it's, if you like to play football, you're a boy. If you want to be a cheerleader, you're a girl. That it's the very same thing. It's just the causation has flipped. Yeah.
I think
Very
a lot of your audience, I would think too, and the parents that you're trying to appeal to about this, a lot of times it's as simple as, like I was telling a story and I've had the husband sometimes come home and go, oh, I've never seen, a woman painter before. I have to kind of like almost talk to them in a different way to make them feel comfortable because there's something that is such a disconnect there for guys that have grown up super traditional. What I mean by that is super gendered, that men and women or gay couples or lesbian couples, they do the same things. They love it when the girls are playing with dolls. They love it when the boys are, playing with trucks. Now, about this idea of fighting gender that's from feminism. That isn't necessarily from somebody's sexual orientation, because I've had big arguments with gay male couples who are raising children and lesbian couples who are raising, and they're doing the same things that their parents might have done to them. And the thing is that gender is nothing but putting boxes around boys and girls. And it has caused a lot of damage because, of course, it causes a confusion if somebody does feel like, forget sexual orientation, for a boy that feels like he wants to have a doll. And he's, and I know guys, I've had male friends that their parents did allow them to play with dolls, and they're straight men now and their husbands and their fathers.
And these days they would be trans.
Well,
exactly.
or rewritten in history. But the thing is that the idea of when somebody says they're a gender abolitionist or whatever, I'm not necessarily like that, because I like to play with gender. I like the idea of playing with clothing. I like the idea of playing with, people being confused around certain things that involve activities, not the way about whether or not we are really trying to create so much of a feature of secondary sex characteristics that we want to trick people.
Right.
Because what we are seeing is such a huge rise in what lesbians started calling, I think the first time I heard this phrase was in 2017, the cotton ceiling. And this is where, literally there are men that are straight, that are predators. Not all men are predators. But there are some.
And if you are a predator, you're really good at figuring out how to find people who are vulnerable.
Exactly.
Really, that is, and it's interesting because there are laws about impersonating lawyers, about impersonating doctors. We've recognized that's dangerous.
Point.
Well, there should be laws about impersonating women, because
Very
that's
good
dangerous.
point. Yeah.
Boy, how are you going to regulate that, right? You just brought up a quagmire of that'd be a very
Well,
interesting.
it's when somebody is pretending to do something in a way that violates, so the way you
But legally, they're not violating us.
well, the way
anymore.
you regulate that is that you really throw the book at the man who pretends to be a woman to gain access to vulnerable women and then rapes them or assaults them.
Yeah.
You really throw the book
Yeah.
at them because
Like the boy here in Loudon,
raped
like the
the
Right.
person, but
Yes.
they've impersonated a male in order to gain access. In the same way, they would throw the book at someone who is pretending to be a doctor and hurt somebody.
Mhm.
That's how you regulate it.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Now there's so many angles of that, but again, I was thinking of, coming into this again. Thank you for this. It's really a surprise, but I know that your audience, whenever I talk to somebody, I try to take into account, I've looked at your website and everything. Who is the audience that you're reaching because of your organization? And it's like when I recently had a conversation with this wonderful he's younger than I am. Almost everybody is at this point. This wonderful man who his name is David Arthur, and he's gone through a kind of life that most people haven't, but a lot of people have too. Prostitution, runaway. I had never spoken in public, in an interview with anybody like that. But David and I spent a lot of time on the phone prior to us getting together and having a public, conversation about that. And I think that no matter what religion, or if you don't have religion, or if you are wealthy, or if you're poor, or whatever, that one of the things, again, that we can all agree on, I would assume a rational mind, unless you've been brainwashed, unless you work at a job where they force you to start using pronouns and you've accepted it, unless you have adopted this idea that you think that all of a sudden throughout the entire human history that we are living in a time where particularly white, straight men, heterosexual men are the most oppressed when they put on women's clothing, that they are the most oppressed minority now that we could possibly imagine, next to this idea that Black trans lives matter and what they are talking about that. And we know that it's money that's behind all this stuff, but when you think about how outrageous is that here we are in the centuries that humans have existed, and now we've got this most oppressed minority, and we're supposed to accept them in our bathrooms, in our Girl Scouts, in our everything.
Yeah, after fighting so hard to get, spaces, when I think about the reason that women couldn't be full members of society for a long time is that there weren't facilities for them. So, it wasn't safe for them to be out and about because there wasn't anywhere for them to go to the bathroom. So we fought to have our own bathrooms.
Isn't that only 100 years ago, Erin?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't
One
that
of the
long
things that's
ago.
very powerful that I remember from my childhood was a story that broke where there was a woman and she was the first firefighter in this community. I don't even remember where it was. She was the first female firefighter, and she wanted her own locker room, and she fought to get her own locker room because she didn't want to have to undress among the males. And there were a lot of people who were like, well, if she wants to be with one of the guys, she needs to, she fought to get her own space because, there's this recognition that we're vulnerable. And I remember how powerful that was, that, I grew up with this concept of women needing their own sports because men were getting scholarships to go to college and women weren't because they couldn't compete against men. So they created women's sports. This all happened during my lifetime. It's absurd to me that we have Thomas, I can't ever remember his first name, the swimmer.
Liar Thomas.
Liar Thomas.
Oh, that's a
Liar.
great name for him.
I like that name.
Liar Thomas.
Who has, this so clearly an intact male who we are now coming to learn has been somewhat intimidating to the women in the locker room and shower, who is walking around in a state of undress with his, fully intact genitalia.
He's a heterosexual man. That's
a heterosexual male. And these women are being oftentimes vilified for being uncomfortable with this. And this is where we, again, need to just keep standing up and saying, no, we need to follow your lead, Joey, and say, no, get out. This is not your space.
That's what I'm saying. It's like going back to that image. The thing about that sign and the man taking it was that one of my colleagues that had that sign was a little bit off guard and was just sitting there, because this was a circus. It was a whole circus that was going on. And he swept by, stole her sign, ran with it. And another one of our 5 people went running after him. I only happened to catch it as I saw her trailing after him. So when I went after that and did that, the thing is that this idea about having any visuals of women fighting back in any way. I mean, if you told me that, this man came in the bathroom and you yelled at him, get out, and he insisted on trying to stay in there or something, I would assume that you would try everything that you could. And if there were other women in the bathroom as well, that would join with you and you would all get him out of there. That's
like
it.
the We Spa woman who went to the and said, there's a pervert in the bathroom. I mean,
Kuwana Angel for 2021.
Yes.
She is that is like the moment to me for 2021, right? And I was thinking about her when I was reaching up, actually, but I did find out legally, by the way, that anything, and I knew this, that if something like that happened and anybody thought that they were being assaulted, Erin, if you and I were having an argument out in public and it got very heated, and I reached over and I was being condescending or something, and I reached over, but you knew I wasn't hitting you, and I touched your shoulder, I made physical contact with your body, and you wanted to be so angry about it that you filed charges against me and said, because technically, yes, anybody can file charges the moment that their body has had contact with somebody. And they could say, she assaulted me. Well, you'd have to go to court to prove it. And if you have witnesses and both people or whatever, but guess what? If you and I are in a political act together, we are banded together and it's known and we've been photographed together and we have a cause and we're doing something like that. And somebody takes your property, they take the property of the whole group. And if one of those individuals goes after and is trying their best without using excessive measures of physical assault, if it's something where they're trying to retrieve their property, we know that the law pays more attention to property than they do people. So it could be a case, and it could be one where that man absolutely, it would have fallen apart. He knew that. That's why nothing ever happened. And everybody knew that was there. But when we talk about, I say as basic as that, I taught self-defense, that something like Maria, you bring up about your daughter, just saying no, you had a lot of sentences there. You said you had to be coached and all these sentences. Imagine women just learning how to say no in a class where they're raising their voice. And that's such a basic thing. And we have a hand movement that we would teach, which is if somebody comes and grabs you this way, and what do we tend to do? We tend to pull, pull, push. It becomes a push-pull thing. And of course, if there's a man, they're gonna just yank you. And there is a movement that we would teach that's a simple thing about how to break a hold, on a wrist or whatever, and say no at the same time. Now you're integrating body movement with a vocal expression. Over time, that becomes very powerful. And when I was teaching self-defense classes, and this was in Portland, Oregon, for a period of 9 months, the United Methodist Women got a grant. They got their money together, $10,000 back in 1978 and 79. They got it in 78 and it was to be used in 1979. And a partner and I, who were teaching self-defense in California earlier, got hired to come. And this is probably one of the things that I'm the proudest of that I ever did, was over 800 women were affected by myself and my teaching partner at the time, between workshops and those 8 weeks, we're talking 3 months, when you're a lifetime of being a female and taught to acquiesce and people please, as most of us were raised, the idea of being in your 20s, 30s, 40s and taking a self-defense class and learning these things, it does take coaching and it takes psychological growth. And this is for 3 months working with women, 3 hours a week. I used to call it, we're replacing the tapes in your brain. We're replacing that wiring that has caused us to become so accepting and so passive to a point where a man coming in the bathroom and you're saying to me, well, Joey, what do you recommend? You know, a man comes in the bathroom. To me, it's like simple as day. It's not just no, it's get probably expletive out of here, you know.
Well,
And
I have a question that I'd love to get your take on. Going back to Liar Thomas, those women on the UPenn swim team, they can't tell him to leave.
no,
Everybody, all the coaches, the administrators have put him there. What can they do?
Preying on this whole the way we've been programmed.
Yeah.
You know,
I
what
think
can
you
they
haven't
do? I
heard
mean,
the latest. I think you haven't heard the latest, Maria. Don't you know that any woman, any of his teammates, any of those locker mates that are being bothered or traumatized literally by his junk, they are now supplying therapists for all these women. So now the women can go and talk about their
and the therapist can tell them that they're transphobic, right?
maybe, who knows what's going on. But the issue is that it's that the fact that they're having to be medicalized in that way, because it's medicine for the brain.
A man's feelings are superseding the rights and protections and freedoms of women.
But it's their mental problem. They have to correct somehow. They have to deal with.
See, I feel like we need to get creative with this situation. And I'm an idea that I've had for a while, and I don't know if it's a good one or not, is when this happens, all the women need to just sit down and stare at that man and laugh, stare at his junk and laugh, point and laugh, mock him. Will that make a difference?
Well, in this particular case, you know that Liar Thomas is supposedly dating one of the women on the team. This was one of the things. So what's the other way that groomers do, right? They watch, they look to see where people are going, how they dress, what their eye contact is and all that. They get closer. How do they get closer to kids? It's like bringing the candy on the regular, you know, every Friday or whatever, and getting closer and closer and closer. How are you going to get physically close to other women other than convincing one of them to be your girlfriend, your lover, your whatever? This is why, and it's something that you all were talking about earlier. I mean, and something, Maya, that you brought up about what was it that you said? There's something about, because we were talking about grooming, but getting close, something about getting close and really learning. What is that for each group whenever you want to infiltrate? I mean, it's something that actually was very clever that Jennifer Billick brought up in an article that had to do with the Trojan horse, the idea of slipping in and being at stealth,
right?
You know, moving in a stealth way.
Right.
I mean, it's war. That's what I wanted to bring up about Jennifer, is that she's talking about the art of war. It's something that she and I have in common. That book, if any women have never, anybody of your audience has never read The Art of War, read it, because you can apply it to so many facets of life. It can inform a lot of things about humans as creatures, as mammals.
You're talking about Sun Tzu.
Yeah,
Yes,
the problem is that we now have little children who are told that if they think this is a war, it's because they're hateful bullies. And so they're undermining children at earlier. I mean, I'm amazed at, you know, the genderbread person being introduced to kindergartners, and they're being taught that if they're uncomfortable having, you know, if girls are uncomfortable having a boy and vice versa in their bathrooms, it's because there's something wrong with them. So these are kids who are, you know, they're being told that they have no idea there's a war, and they're being taught that any of us who think there's a war are the bad guys. They're at war against us for standing up for our rights and protections.
Well, it's that idea, isn't it, of being scared that somebody's not going to like you.
Yeah.
Being scared that somebody's going to think you're a mean person. Being scared that somebody's going to think that you're evil, even. I mean, anything. Most of us cannot tolerate the idea of people rejecting us. And I think that when you grow up like myself, you know, and I'm saying that as not just a little, you know, not just like a little lesbian that I didn't know the word or anything, but I knew I was different. So when you grow up, and Erin, for different reasons, you were othered. When you are othered, whether it's skin color, sexual orientation, the sports that you want to play, the thing that you like to do, the way you want, when you are othered, if you're going to survive in the world, you learn, what am I supposed to behave like, given this family, given this community, given this whatever, given these times. I was told from the time I was a little kid that I was way ahead of my time. I had no idea what people meant about that, because I'm in my world. I'm watching movies. I'm learning that kind of storytelling. And I learned a lot about, because of imagination. That was where my thing went. But when you are othered, you either learn how to survive looking at your surroundings and how you are to behave in order to stay alive. People like me don't even think about thriving. We think about just like surviving and not getting killed and not getting physically harmed.
Yeah.
And isn't that a pathetic way to,
And
think? I mean, it's kind of really basic. It's kind of really basic when you look at the boys that I was friends with when I was a little girl. They could get away with so much. They didn't have to worry so much about, I mean, some of them, I grew up in a generation also where spanking was the thing. You might get hit across the face by your parent.
Or teacher.
Or teacher.
Teacher.
Exactly. And you know what? I was that weird little kid that when I got pulled into the principal's office, me and a little girl named Mary Gonzalez. Don't even ask. I've had a million people say, have you tried to find Mary lately? Do you know how many Mary Gonzalez's there are? She probably got married, took on her husband's name. But anyway, me and Mary Gonzalez got pulled into, in 4th grade, the principal's office because we were climbing over the walls in the girls' bathrooms to scare each other. We would scare another girl, there's things that kids do. Well, we were doing it on a regular basis and having a great time laughing about it. And usually the girls that got scared, they would get after us later and chase us or, whatever. We got pulled into the principal's office. The principal decided that he was going to spank both Mary and I. That was going to be the punishment. You know what I did? And I'm 10 years old. I don't know what it was in me, except that I felt like I could do this. And my father was a teacher at the school also. And, so of course he knew the principal, but I remember this principal being so mad, and he was going to have Mary leave the room first and spank me first. And she was supposed to wait outside. And I guess maybe he thought that I would scream or cry and then that would scare her more. And he started to rise up out of his seat. He was in one of those big old chairs. This is like something out of a sitcom now that, Saturday Night Live would make fun of. And he started to get up and I said, you're not touching me. I'm going to tell my dad. I'm going to tell everybody. Wow. You don't touch Mary and you don't touch me. And she was just shaking. And the other thing about Mary Gonzalez, she was a brown-skinned little girl. Both of us were very working class. So we'll talk about that. But I haven't thought about that in years. Not the way that it came down. I haven't thought about it in years. So thank you for bringing that up. But there's that thing too, where I was just kind of a weird kid. I mean, I knew from jump there was something about, I didn't know if I was going to be able to survive in the world because of all the stuff that I had just going on in my head that was not normal.
Yeah.
It was not your normal child. And I'm saying normal.
Well, and look at you now. We need to celebrate the fact that you weren't normal, because I think that it takes those of us who are used to being on the margins, who are to stand
outliers.
The outliers, because I know what it's not going to get worse than it was for me when I was a kid. Like, I might go to jail. Yeah, I don't want to go to jail, but ultimately I survived the worst that's going to happen to me when I was a kid. And so really bring it on. And I think that's why those of us who are sort of on the forefront of this are quirky and different and odd. And we're the ones who are saying, we know what it's like to be marginalized, and buddy, you are not it. You are the predator here.
Absolutely.
And not just that, and thank you for that. I was thinking of somebody I've been becoming friends with, and now thankfully I've been able to meet her in person. A young woman named Amy Ichikawa, who lives in Los Angeles, and she was incarcerated for a period of time, a short period of time, but still, when she got out, she said, I want to do everything I can to help women who are incarcerated, that when they get out, will have an easier transition back into, normal society, right? Amy didn't know this stuff was going on, like even you and I and Maria and May have known for a number of years now, and for me, decades. She didn't know any of this. It took WeSpa for her to very naively get one of Posey's t-shirts that said woman, adult, human, female. She thought she was going to be joining in and supporting other women. She is Christian. She has a Christian community where she is. Very naively, she wears this woman, adult, human, female t-shirt to the WeSpa thing, was attacked by Antifa, and all of a sudden so she's very new. It's not even been a full year. And now she and I have connected. She's connected with all these people. And what's happening for her is that Amy, who has created an organization called Woman to Woman, and anybody of your audience or anybody that's working in your, organization or anything, none of us want to go to jail. But can you imagine, Erin, now, if not only you went to jail, but you went to prison, because jail is usually an overnight, you're going to be in jail for a few days if you did something. Maybe you did some civil disobedience that got out of hand. You did something illegal. That's jail. We're talking prison. And any of us at any time, especially with what's going on now, could be accused of something that maybe we didn't do and get the book thrown at us. And because we see these laws changing, and the word woman, and Amy wrote it on her Facebook, she said, I never thought in a million years I would see the very word woman being erased, because what Amy is dealing with is a kind of, I would say, daily crisis and daily trauma. That when I was working in a battered women's shelter, when I was working a rape crisis hotline, when I was working doing street rescue for kids, street kids, that stuff wears on you for a while. And Amy is daily getting emails from female prisoners. Forget what the crime is that a woman was put in prison with. They're usually non-violent, though, which is different than male prisoners. Female prisoners, by and large, are not going to prison usually for violent crimes. Not usually. She's getting emails every day begging her, my cellmate is raping me. I can't sleep because the cells, the man and woman in the cell next door are having sex. There's noises, there's this, women are getting pregnant. Right. The rape and assault of women in a trapped location. We know, because we've been fighting around stuff for kids to not be medicalized and to not be stigmatized because of playing with different toys and being trans and this whole thing. Think about being a vulnerable, and one of the most vulnerable things I could possibly think of. You're talking literally about being locked in a room, and the next cellmate that comes in has simply said, I'm a woman. And he feels like a woman, and the law is protecting this. Gavin Newsom, all of this stuff.
It makes me stay up at night. I think about it, and it's
going on worldwide too. Worldwide.
Yes, that's right.
It is not just an isolated thing.
Well, thank you so much, Joey. We appreciate your voice. We appreciate your efforts. We appreciate all that you're doing. I encourage people to go to, Can I Get a Witness? Is that a website or a Facebook?
Not a website. I don't have that, but I do have two different things going on. If you're on Anchor, or you want to look up my podcast on Anchor, and it's on Spotify, on Apple, Can I Get a Witness is there for a podcast. I have some voices of parents. Right now, there's going to be a lot of different voices that will show up on there. Excellent. And if you go to Facebook and you say, oh, I'm not on it, you can go to Can I Get a Witness? Voices, I believe, is the word that they might have on there with Facebook. And you can DM me. And if you're on Instagram, you can send me something. I have to have a private account, like most women who are like us and the way that we think, or else we'll get kicked off of social media. Right. And if you are on Getter, GETTR.com, go to Getter. It is a free speech platform. Yes. And it's the thing that was developed by a man named Jason Miller. Yes, it was a pro-Trump idea and all this. It's kind of the alternative to Twitter, but it was for conservatives in the way of political conservatives and religiously conservative people who were also political. And it has become something else. And I think something that Jason Miller didn't necessarily see, and thousands of women and men of good conscience have gone over together to speak freely. And you can
We
find
just,
each other,
yeah, we
find
just,
each other and connect. And you can say things like,
You can
there
say
is no
anything.
such thing as a woman with penis, and not have to worry about getting deplatformed.
yeah, we just, advocates just opened up our account on Getter too.
Good.
So we'll have to connect with you there. And if anybody wants to reach out to Joey, you can reach out through Advocates Protecting Children, our website, advocatesprotectingchildren.org, or advocatesprotectingchildren@gmail.com. And we will get that message to Joey.
Thank
Super.
you. And I am
so
Joey
much.
you.
Bright on Getter. So I'm thrilled that you're on there. That's great. Free
Yeah.
speech, right? Free speech.
Absolutely.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks,
Thank you
Joey.
so
Thank
much.
you.